Okay. Uh, can you hear my voice clearly, inshallah?
Clear, Pak Irfan.
Okay,
Mas
thank
Irfan.
you. Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Allahumma shalli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. Amma ba'du. A very good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Irfan Triputra. You can call me Irfan. I'm a student of Taskia University, and today I'm as a moderator for this parallel session. Thank you. Well, on behalf of the organizing committee on international webinar on Islamic economics and policy, jointly organized by Taskia University Indonesia and INSAFE University Malaysia, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this parallel session. It is my honor to warmly welcome to our distinguished academic reviewer, Associate Professor Dr. Ismail Nizam, Head of MBA Sustainable Business Program in SAFE University, Malaysia. We are truly grateful for your valuable time and willingness to provide scholarly insight and constructive feedback to our presenters today. I will also to extend my warmest welcome to our presenters today. We have four presenters. Presenter one is Ms. Widya Dian Wulandari. Presenter 2 is Mr. Amrizal. Presenter 3 is Mr. Bambang Rahmat Raflis. Presenter number 4 is Mr. Anas Kurniawan, as well as for all participant and audience member joining this session. Thank you very much for your participation. Well, inshallah, before we begin, please allow me to briefly explain the flow of today's session. This parallel session will be run for approximately 100 minutes. The session consists of 4 parts. The first part is a research paper presentation by the presenters, and second one is academic review and constructive feedback from our distinguished reviewer. And we will continue for interactive Q&A session with the audience and closing. Alhamdulillah, to ensure the session run smoothly and on schedule, I kindly ask all presenters to strictly observe the allocated presentation time. During the presentation, participants are encouraged to keep their microphone mute. The question from the audience may be submitted through the Zoom raise hand feature or can write on the chat box and will be addressed in Q&A session. We certainly appreciate everyone cooperation. Well, without further ado, let us begin our presentation session. It's my pleasure to invite our first presenter, Ms. Widya Dian Wulandari, with the paper entitled From Maqasid to Green Policy, Hifdhu Al-Bi'ah Within the SDGs and Islamic Green Finance Framework. Ms. Widya, you have approximately 10 minutes for your presentation. The floor is yours. You can share your screen, please.
Irfan, my slide is come. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Respected our reviewer, Bapak Dr. Ismail Nizam, and also college. Thank you for this opportunity. Today, I will present my paper entitled From Makassar to Green Policy, Hifz al-Bi'ah within the SDGs and Islamic Green Finance Framework. The main idea of this paper is that environmental protection is not only a technical or economic issue, but also in Islamic POV, it can also be understood as Makassar Sharia, especially to the concept of Hifz al-Bi'ah or protection of the environment. My presentation is divided into 5 parts. First, background, methodology, findings, proposed contribution, and I will close with the conclusion and recommendation. The background of this study start from the one main issue today. The world has already sustainability goals, green policy, and sustainability finance instrument. But however, there is still a gap between global goals, ethical value, and the real sector implementation. This paper argues that Hifz al-Bi'ah can become a Kamasit-based bridge to connect those dimensions. The global sustainability challenge is become more urgent. Based on SDGs report 2025, only 35% of the SDGs target are on track or making progress, while 18% are making moving backward. More than 800 million people still live in the extreme poverty. More than 120 million people have been forced from their homes. And 2 years ago, in 2024, was recorded as the hottest year on the record. This fact show that sustainability is not only about commitment, but it's need or requires stronger implementation. And why this study matter? Because we have 2 sides. First, one side in the left, we have a global crisis, and this progress remain slow and fragmented or partially. Green policy has developed, but it can be more. It can it become too technical if it's not supported by strong ethical value. On the other side, Islamic economics offers Maqasid al-Sharia as an ethical foundation to development. So the question is, how can Islamic values support sustainability in more practical way or policy relevant way? The problem is no longer the absence of sustainability goals. The real challenge is how to translate goals into value, policies, and other mechanism. Therefore, the main research question is how can Hifz al-Bi'ah function as an integrative framework, a link among Islamic value, green policy, finance, governance, and real sector implementation. This question is answered through conceptual synthesis and 3 proposed outputs. This study uses a qualitative interpretative approach, means that the study does not test any statistical hypothesis. Instead, it interpret and connect a concept or value from different sources. And the strategy used is a non-reactive document-based research that the data taken from current document, such book, journal article, SDGs report, and other government document. The analysis uses thematic coding and narrative synthesis. The research design has 5 steps. First, we read document, review document, relate to Makassar, sustainability, green policy, and others. The second is open coding, was used to identify the concept and recurring ideas from each document. The third is Excel coding that we use the group related codes into broader categories and try to find interrelationship between the codes. The fourth, these categories were synthesis into major themes that I found five major themes here. And finally, we do narrative synthesis, was used to integrate the themes into a coherent conceptual framework and policy proposal. And what we found from the coding process, I found five main themes. First is normative foundation of Hifz al-Biyah. Second is green policy and sustainability governance. Number three is Islamic green finance as an implementation mechanism. In this theme, show that Islamic finance can support sustainability when the instruments are directed to green and socially beneficial to the activities. Number four is themes of implementation gap and integration challenge. These themes show that the green and Sharia claims must be tested through real sector outcomes, not only through labels, the green or not green. And then this finding explain how an Islamic environmental concept can be more operational in policy and finance discussion. And together in these five themes show that Hifz al-Biyah can act as an integrative bridge. Based on the finding, this paper proposed a framework that connect Maqasid value to policy instrument, decision, institutional accountability, and sectoral impact. This slide show that the main synthesis on the paper, on the top, we have Maqasid Sharia as the ethical foundation, and then from Maqasid Hifz al-Biyah becomes the ecological expression of Maqasid, and then Hifz al-Biyah connects three important dimensions: green policy, green finance, and governance. And then the three dimension, and then have to test it in the real sector implementation. And finally, the expected result can be shown in sustainability outcomes or SDGs outcome. So Hifz al-Biyah works as both a bridge and a filter also. From this integrative logic, the paper proposes three main tools. First is green policy framework based on Maqasid. Number two, green governance model based on Maqasid, and Hifz al-Biyah diagnosis checklist. The first one is a Maqasid-based green policy framework. This framework has an objective is to help read or to understand green policy from a Maqasid perspective of view. It asks whether a green policy is not only technically compliant but also aligned with maslahah, prevention of harm, and environmental protection. We can see from this slide there are six synthesis elements. First is Maqasid. Number two is clear environmental objective. Number three, operational criteria and indicator like DNSH, do not significant harm, remedial measure to transition. This is what I found from document TKBI from OJK. And number four is a linkage with a financial instrument, and number five is testing in the real sector. It's depend on where the industry. It can be energy, agriculture, mining, and extra. And the last is the impact. How reporting and accountability can very important to make sure give a feedback and continuous improvement. The second tools is a green governance model from Maqasid perspective of view. This green governance model has an objective is to clarify how different parties or how different actors should work together so the Maqasid green policy can be implemented to accountable practice. There are central government, technical ministry, Islamic financial institution, business actor, zakat and wakaf institution, and the others. And the third tools is Hifz Al-Bi'ah diagnosis checklist. The objectives of this checklist is to provide a simple conceptual tools for checking whether a policy, financial decision, or real sector proactivity is aligned to maqasid and environmental protection. The question is important because each question checks one part of the implementation change. The question, for examples, is how it identify the relationship with maqasid value are protective, and then map how sustainability issue, which one, or is it related to climate, to water, to energy, and the other, and assess green policy criteria. Does the activity meet green policy standard? Like in Indonesia, we have TKBI and the other. We come to the conclusion in the final part. The conclusion is first, Hifz Al-Bi'ah can position as an ecological extension from Maqasid Al-Sharia. Second, from the coding show that Hifz Al-Bi'ah is relevant to SDGs, to policy, to finance, governance, and real sector implementation. The third is by bridging those dimensions, Hifz Al-Bi'ah support three tools. First is about policy alignment. Number two is about government model for accountability, and diagnostic checklist for assessing the implementation. So protecting the environment is not merely as an environmental objective. It is mostly it's a maqasid objective. From the recommendation, use the framework. Number one is use the framework as policy reference. The proposed maqasid-based green policy framework can be considered in the future updates of national sustainability development. Maybe what I can imagine is in RPJPN, Rencana Pembangunan Jangka Panjang Nasional, providing an ethical bridge between development objective and operational instruments such as TKBI. Number two is specify governance and roles and coordination. Future sustainable development and sustainable finance policy should specify institutional responsibility and coordination mechanism across a regulator, technical ministry, financial institution, and a sector actor using a proposed governance model as a reference. Number three is include a diagnostic checklist in as an implementation guideline. Future green policy and sustainable finance implementation guidelines should incorporate a maqasid-based diagnosis checklist as a complementary assessment tool to evaluate whether policy, finance align with maqasid value, technical standard, and sustainability outcomes. I think that's my last slide. Thank you very much. I welcome your question and feedback. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Ms. Widya, for your excellent presentation. Now, let us continue to the second presenter, Mr. Amrizal. Can you share your screen, Mr. Amrizal?
Thank you, Mr. Irfan. First, I share to my presentation.
Yeah. Okay, you have approximately 10 minutes, Mr. Amrizal. You may now begin your presentation, please.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today I will presenting the topics SDGs and Hifz Al-Alam, harmony or paradigm difference of sustainable development in the perspective of Islamic political economy. First, I will explain the background writing the topic. Economic development has led to various advances in improving human welfare. However, their successes have also been accompanied by increasingly complex environmental issues, such as climate change, pollution, deforestation, loss of biodiversity, et al. This problem not only threaten the sustainability of global ecosystem, but also have the potential to disrupt economic stability and human well-being in the future. In response to these various challenges, the UN launched the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015 as a global development agenda running until 2030. The SDGs consist of 17 goals and 169 targets designed to strike a balance between economic growth, social justice, and environmental sustainability. From an Islamic perspective, development is not just understood as improving material well-being, but also an effort to achieve welfare and balance in life according to Sharia principles. The concept of development in Islam is rooted in the Maqasid Syariah, which aim to protect religion, life, intellect, lineage, and wealth. These 5 goals serve as the main foundation for realizing overall human well-being. The idea that environmental protection should be considered an important part of the Maqasid Syariah later become known as Hifz al-Bi'ah or Hifz al-Alam, which emphasize the importance of maintaining the balance and sustainability of nature as a trust given by Allah to humans. The concept is based on various verses of the Quran that forbid corruption on earth and affirm humans' position as caliphs responsible for taking care of the universe. This slide identifies the research gap by explaining that although existing studies have established the normative compatibility between SDGs and Maqasid Syariah, as well as the alignment of Islamic value with sustainable development. There remains limited research that examine environmental protection through the concept of Hifz al-Alam within an Islamic political economy framework, particularly in relation to competing development paradigms, equitable resource distribution, and the role of the state in advancing sustainable environmental governance. This study aims to first analyze the concept of Hifz al-Alam from an Islamic political economy perspective. Next, analyze the sustainable development paradigm embedded in the SDGs. Analyze the degree of alignment between the SDGs and Hifz al-Alam, and analyze the paradigmatic differences underlying both frameworks. A global development agenda adopted by 193 UN member states in 2015 through Transforming Our World. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is success the Millennium Development Goals with broader scope. Scholars criticize the SDGs as still anthropocentric, placing human at the center of development, in contrast to Islam's view of humanity relationship with both nature and its creator. Maqasid Syariah are the main goals that Islamic law aims to achieve in human life. Imam Ghazali explained the purpose of Maqasid Syariah to protect 5 basic human needs, which are religion, Hifz al-Din, life, Hifz al-Nafs, intellect, Hifz al-Aqal, lineage, Hifz al-Nasl, and property, Hifz al-Mal. In the development contemporary Islamic thought, some experts believe that classical Maqasid needs to be expanded to address various modern challenges, including environmental. including environmental crisis and the universe as parts of the objective of Sharia. The concept of Hifz al-Alam is based on the teaching of the Quran, which emphasizes that humans are stewards on earth with the responsibility to maintain ecological balance. Allah says, "And do not cause corruption on the earth after it has been set in order." This verse shows that taking care of the environment is part of human responsibility as stewards. Therefore, over-exploitation of natural resources. Environmental pollution and various forms of ecological damage can be seen as actions that go against the principle of Sharia. According to Yusuf Al-Qaradawi, environmental preservation is part of the religious responsibility that every Muslim must carry out. Meanwhile, Jasser Auda sees environmental protection as a part of the development of the subjective of Sharia, which is dynamic and responsive to changing times. Islamic political economy is a study that looks at the relationship between economic activities, public policy, and Islamic value in achieving community welfare. Unlike the conventional development paradigm, which often focuses on economic growth, Islamic political economy places justice, al-adl, public interest, maslahah, and balanced tawazun as the main goals of development. According to Umar Chapra, development in Islam is not just measured by increasing its income or GDP, but also by society ability to achieve social justice, equitable distribution of wealth, and sustainability of natural resources. Therefore, development should be aimed at achieving falah or well-being in this world and the hereafter. Sustainable development is the main goal that the SDGs aim to achieve from an Islamic perspective. This goal is related to the concept of Hifz al-Alam, which emphasizes the importance of preserving the environment. Although both share relatively that the same goal, there are underlying differences in their paradigm. This research used a qualitative method with a library research approach. Data was obtained from various secondary sources such as books, scientific journal, United Nations document, SGD report, and literature that discusses Maqasid Sharia and Islamic political economy. The data collection technique was carried out through documentation studies of various references relevant to the research topic. Then the data were analyzed using content analysis and comparative analysis method to identify the similarities and differences in paradigm between the SGD and the concept Hifz al-Alam from the perspective of Islamic political economy. In general, SGD and Hifz al-Alam share relatively similar goals in maintaining the sustainability of human life and the environment. Both emphasize the importance of managing natural resources responsibly to ensure the well-being of both current and future generations. Several SDG goals directly related to the environment aligned with the concept Hifz al-Alam, which stresses the protection of nature as a trust that humans must take care of. The table shows that there are actually many common points between the SDGs and Hifz al-Alam in the effort to achieve sustainable development. Even though they have relatively the same goals, the SDG and Hifz al-Alam have different philosophical foundation. The SDG from a global agreement focus on economic, social, and environmental sustainability. Meanwhile, Hifz al-Alam is based on Islamic teaching that place humans as Allah's stewards, responsible for maintaining the balance of nature. These differences shows that Hifz al-Alam has a stronger spiritual dimension compared to the SDGs. In Islam, taking care of the environment is not just a development need, but also part of religious responsibility. In conclusion, the study saw that the SDG and the concept Hifz al-Alam align in effort to maintain environmental sustainability, manage natural resource, and ensure the well-being of future generation. Both emphasize the importance of development that considers environmental and sustainability aspect. However, there is a difference in the underlying paradigm. The SDG system from a global development consensus oriented towards economic, social, and environmental sustainability. Meanwhile, Hifz al-Alam is rooted in Islamic values that place human as Allah's stewards, responsible for taking care of nature as a trust. Therefore, the concept of Hifz al-Alam can serve as an ethical and spiritual foundation that strengthens the implementation of sustainable development within the SDGs framework, especially in countries where most of the population is Muslim. Further research can examine the implementation of the concept Hifz al-Alam in sustainable development policies in various Muslim countries, so it can provide a more comprehensive picture of the contribution of Islamic political economy to achieving in the SDGs. That's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for Mr. Amrizal for your insightful presentation. Now we will move to the third presenter. Yeah, it's now my pleasure to invite Mr. Bambang Rahmat Raflis to present the paper entitled Digital Government as an Instrument of Bureaucratic Efficiency in the Muslim World, Institutional and Maqasid al-Sharia Perspective. Mr. Bambang, you have approximately 10 minutes. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Irfan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, respected Associate Professor Dr. Ismail Nizam. My name is Bambang, and today I would like to present my paper entitled Digital Government as Instrument for Bureaucratic Efficiency in the Islamic World, an Institutional and Maqasid Syariah Perspective. In this presentation, I will explain why digital government should not be viewed merely as the digitalization of public service, but rather as an institutional reform agenda that integrates technology, good governance, and Islamic values to improve bureaucratic efficiency. Let me begin with the background of this study. The digital revolution has fundamentally changed public expectation of government services. Today, citizens expect services that are not only available but also fast, accessible, transparent, and accountable. However, many countries in the Islamic world still struggle with lengthy administrative procedure, fragmented public service, weak interagency coordination, and corruption. Therefore, digital government has become an essential strategy for modern bureaucratic reform. The main argument of this paper is that digital government can improve bureaucratic efficiency only when digital technology is supported by strong institutions, competent human resources, sound regulation, cybersecurity, and Islamic values such as amanah, justice, and maslahah. To support this argument, I developed the following theoretical framework. This study is built upon four major theoretical perspectives. First, digital government and bureaucratic efficiency, which explains how digital technology improves public services, transparency, and administrative performance. And second, Acemoglu's institutional theory, which argue that countries prosper not because of technology alone, but because of the quality of their institution. Third, evidence from Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, and Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC countries, showing that digital transformation succeeds only when supported by effective governance and institutional capacity. And Finally, Islamic governance and Maqasid Syariah emphasizing that digital government should pursue not only efficiency, but also trustworthiness, justice, public participation, and public welfare. I will explain the research methodology. The study adopts a qualitative descriptive approach using a literature review. The literature was analyzed using a thematic approach focusing on 4 dimensions. First, digital government and bureaucratic efficiency. Second, digitalization in OIC countries. And third, smart government in GCC countries. And fourth, Islamic governance and Maqasid Syariah. This approach allows the study to examine digital government from technological, institutional, economic, and ethical perspective simultaneously. Based on this methodology, I will now present the main finding of the study. The first finding is that digital government is fundamentally an institutional reform rather than merely a technology initiative. Traditional bureaucracy are often characterized by lengthy procedures, fragmented data, limited transparency, weak accountability, and high corruption risk. Digital government addresses these problems by standardizing administrative processes, integrating government data, improving transparency, and strengthening accountability through the digital monitoring and audit trails. Therefore, digital government is not about transforming paper into digital application. It is about transforming how government works. However, the implementation of digital government varies significantly across the Islamic world. The OIC countries are far from being homogeneous in terms of digital government implementation. While some countries have already entered the smart government stage, others are still in the early phase of e-government development. These differences are largely influenced by institutional quality, human capital, regulatory frameworks, political stability, fiscal capacity, and digital infrastructure. Research by Ali and colleagues demonstrates the digitalization contributes positively to economic growth across OIC countries. However, these benefits are not distributed equally. Countries with stronger broadband infrastructure, better internet access, and more qualified human resources tend to gain greater economic benefits from digital transformation. To better understand a successful digital transformation in the Islamic world, let us examine the experiences of GCC countries, which have made remarkable progress in implementing smart government. The GCC countries provide valuable lessons on how digital government can serve as a strategic instrument for economic diversification and public sector reform. The United Arab Emirates and Qatar are recognized as digital leader due to their advanced digital infrastructure and high-quality public services. And then Saudi Arabia and Bahrain are considered policy pioneers, particularly through national initiatives such as Vision 2030. Meanwhile, Kuwait and Oman remain transitional economies, continuing to strengthen their digital governance system. The key lessons from the GCC experiences is that successful digital government is driven not only by technological investment, but also by strong political leadership, a clear national vision, regulatory reform, public-private partnership, robust digital infrastructure, and continuous investment in human capital. Having explored the experiences of GCC countries and OIC countries, the next question is how does digital government actually improve bureaucratic efficiency? Digital government improves bureaucratic efficiency through several key mechanisms. First, it reduces transaction costs by eliminating unnecessary administrative procedures and minimizing the need for citizens to visit government office. Second, it accelerates public service delivery through integrated database, digital verification, electronic payments, and faster approval processes. Third, it enhances transparency by making procedures, service fees, processing times, and application status publicly accessible. And fourth, it strengthens accountability through digital audit trails, allowing every administrative action and decision to be monitored and traced. Finally, it encourages greater public participation by providing online complaint channels, digital consultation platform, and electronic surveys. Therefore, bureaucratic efficiency should not be measured solely by faster services, but also by greater transparency, stronger accountability, and more inclusive public participation. However, from an Islamic perspective, the success of digital government cannot be measured by efficiency alone. It must also reflect the values of amanah, justice, and maslahah. Islam provides an ethical framework for evaluating digital government. The principle of amanah requires governments to protect citizens' personal data. The principle of justice requires digital system to be free from algorithmic bias and discrimination. Meanwhile, the principle of maslahah emphasizes that the benefits of digital transformation must reach all members of society, including vulnerable groups. Therefore, digital government should ultimately serve the objectives of Maqasid Syariah, promoting public welfare rather than technological advancement alone. Despite these opportunities, several major challenges remain. The implementation of digital government in the Islamic world still face several important challenges. These include unequal digital infrastructure, limited digital literacy, outdated regulation, cybersecurity threats, privacy concerns, and fragmented government system. These findings suggest that successful digital transformation requires not only technological investment, but also institutional strengthening, regulatory reform, and integrated governance. Another critical issue concerns the resilience of digital government itself. As governments become increasingly dependent on digital systems, they also become more vulnerable to cyber attacks, data breach, server failures, and technical disruption. A clear example is the ransomware attack on Indonesia National Data Center in 2024, which disrupted several essential public services. Therefore, government should adopt the concept of digital resilience by strengthening cybersecurity, establishing backup system, developing disaster recovery centers, and implementing business continuity plans. Furthermore, government should apply the principle of digital first, but not digital only. Digital services should remain the primary channel, while alternative services mechanisms should always be available during emergencies. Based on these findings, I propose several policy recommendations. The proposed recommendation can be grouped into 4 strategic priorities. First, strengthen digital foundation through infrastructure development, integrated government data, and cybersecurity. Second, reform governance by simplifying a bureaucratic process, strengthening regulation, and establishing an Islamic digital governance framework. Third, promote integrity and inclusiveness through Sharia audits, AI ethics audit, and equal digital access for all citizens. Finally, strengthen digital resilience through business continuity plans, disaster recovery center, and hybrid public services. Together, these strategies will help build a sustainable digital government aligned with Islamic value. Finally, I would like to conclude this presentation. In conclusion, digital government has significant potential to improve bureaucratic efficiency by simplifying procedures, accelerating services, reducing transaction costs, enhancing transparency, and strengthening accountability. However, technology alone is not enough. The success of digital transformation depends on strong institutions, capable human resources, effective regulation, cybersecurity, and good governance. From an Islamic perspective, digital government should contribute to Makosid governance, ensuring trust, justice, public welfare, and the protection of citizen rights. To conclude, I would like to leave one key message. Digital government is not merely about adopting new technologies. It is about transforming institutions through good governance and Islamic values to build a bureaucracy that is efficient, transparent, accountable, and oriented toward public welfare. Thank you very much for your attention, and I return to Mas Irfan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah. Thank you very much, Mr. Bambang, for sharing your interesting research with us. Now, as the last presenters today, the fourth presenter. Now, I invite Mr. Anas Kurniawan to present the paper entitled "Mathematical Models of the Gini Coefficient and Wealth Redistribution in Islam." Mr. Anas, you have approximately 10 minutes. Whenever you are ready, please begin your presentation.
Thank you, Pak Irfan, for my turn. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, Associate Professor Dr. Ismail Nizam, and then Bu Riz Wulandari, and then all of the participants that already attend this international for webinar on Islamic economics and policy held by Taskia University. So, as the last presenter, today I would like to present the mathematical model of the Gini coefficient and wealth distribution in Islam, an analytic mathematical study of the zakat, wakaf, infak, and sodaqah. I think economic inequality is one of the most pressing challenges that we face today. So this paper would like to try to provide an integrative analysis of the Gini coefficient as one of the mathematical tools for measuring wealth distribution inequality alongside with Islamic wealth redistribution mechanism, particularly we know zakat, wakaf, infak, and sodaqah. Let me start with the background, the urgent context of this paper. As you may aware that approximately 46% of the global wealth is held by just the richest 1% of the world's population. This is the report from Oxfam in 2023. And then in terms of the Indonesian context, Gini ratio in Indonesia stand at 0.38. This is based on the BPS, Statistical Bureau Agency in Indonesia. You can imagine that around 80 million population in Indonesia, so the income distribution remaining skewed, without deliberate distributive intervention. I think this gap is unlikely to close. Maybe we can decrease this inequality. And then from the perspective of Islam, for over 14th century, Islam has already formulated a comprehensive framework, how to address precisely this problem. As mentioned by Quran Surah Al-Hashr, instruct us that explicitly the wealth must not circulate only among the wealthy. So this brings us the central question of this paper, how can Islam through zakat, wakaf, infak, and sodakoh can contribute to miserable reduction in the inequality. And then to understand where our paper, my paper stand, we must first identify what is the missing one from the existing literature, So if we start from the literature gap, we can see that the substantial body of the work exists on the both side of the inquiry. I think in the welfare economics, we maybe have built a highly sophisticated mathematical tools, while Islamic scholars have produced normative analysis of Yakat and Wakaf. However, I think the analytical integration between these two domains remain limited, particularly in Indonesian literature. Most studies are either mathematically, Islamic agnostic, but or in the other side is Islamically grounded but lacking from the formal quantitative modeling. So the research question, I think, how can the mathematical model of the Gini coefficient maybe can use to measure and simulate the impact of Islamic wealth distribution mechanism or inequality. So the objective of this research, I think there are four research objectives. The first one is how we can present the mathematical foundation of the Gini coefficient and Lorentz curve. And the second one, analyze the principles of redistribution on Islam. The third one is build a simulation model of the Zakat Wakaf impact on the Gini. And then I think this is also the interesting one, the formulation of policy implication and the future research agenda that not yet covered on this paper or this study. And I need to explain maybe the of the two parallel intellectual traditions comparing the conventional economics and the Islamic economics. You can see that on the conventional side, there is some theory starting from Pareto that observe 80/20 rules of the wealth distribution is only concentrate on the 20% of the population in the world. And then the second one of the Lorentz give us the graphical tool that remains central today. And then the third one of the Gini coefficient transform that insight into a single measure, of the mathematical model is built on that. And then in 1979, Amartya Sen extended the measurement to the multidimensional poverty. And then Sorok in 1982 also introduced the Gini decomposition by income sources. In 1984, and then Foster Gill Thorbeck indices introduce poverty depth and sovereignty indices. And the last one, we know that Piketty in 2014 demonstrate to the historical data where the wealth inequality is a structural tendency, not a temporary aberration. And in the other side, on the Islamic side, and then we can see that the foundation in Islamic pillar, yeah, we know Tawhid, Adil, and Maslahah, human as Khalifah, not absolute owner. This is the concept of Islam that the wealth cannot be centralized on only one person or some person, yeah. And then by 1992, of Chapra formalized of prohibition of riba, yeah, mandatory zakat, wakaf, and inheritance law function as a structural anti-inequality mechanism. And then the last one, Mirakor and Iqbal in 2011 demonstrate that Islam finance sharing architecture creates a more egalitarian economic system. So the synthesis of conventional economics offer the mathematical tool, while the Islamic economic offer the normative framework and redistributive instrument. Our paper put them in combination, asking what happened to the Guinea when the formally model Islamic transfer flow. And then we can continue to the how the comparative Guinea data. This is the chart present the number in 2023 Gini coefficient across 7 countries. The data is coming from Biro Pusat Statistik, yeah. You can see that Bangladesh, I think the most equal in this peer group, Vietnam, Thailand, and then Indonesia, yeah. Indonesia stand at 0.381. The position is above the Vietnam figure, yeah. And this is a significant observation, yeah. I think in Indonesia is the largest Muslim majority nation in the world with enormous potential zakat collection. However, the Gini ratio still places among the higher inequality country, yeah, comparing to the regional comparison. And as you can see that the second bar here, the asterisk here at Indonesia at 0.339. This is the paper projection, yeah. What is the Indonesia Gini ratio become under the full national zakat realization? You can see that it would place Indonesia below Vietnam, Thailand, and close to Bangladesh. I think this is a transformation in a regional inequality. And the question is why it's not yet work at scale. I think the question is what this paper will be addressed. And we now arrive to the mathematical, I think, sorry. Yeah, I think this is the previous research, yeah, that already done by some researcher, yeah, starting from Al-Matar by 2015, using the dual track fiscal with the sample of Kuwait. The key finding is that zakat and tax complementary is not substitutive, yeah, one, yeah. And then the second one is Beck and Pratama by 2016 using CBAS model. The sample is in poker residents in Indonesia. The finding is the significant reduction is in mustahik material poverty. And then continue to 2016, using panel data in 17 OECD countries, find that Zakat has ample potential to contribute toward the alleviation of poverty. And then by 2019, what Riz and Zakirov studied in Lombok Timur, Nusa Tenggara Barat, using the multiple linear regression and simple regression to adopt the microfinance practice, that the conclusion that this microfinance can reduce the poverty in three aspects: financial, social, and as well as the spiritual. And then Herianingrum in 2022, using the bibliometric review, found that zakat management will consider to reduce the level of poverty line, especially on the mustahik side. And then the last one, Jaffer, by 2022, using the Aceh-based model with the computational simulation, found that there will be a sharp decline in pure population share from around 67% to below 30%.
Sorry, interrupt. Boleh dipercepat?
Oh, thank you. Okay, Pak. Pak. Yeah.
1-2 minute reminding, please.
Thank you, Pak, for the reminder. I think this is the mathematical model. This is the Lorenz curve. The left side is showing us the map of cumulative population and the x-axis against the cumulative income share on the population. And the right side is the geometric definition. I think we can skip this one. And this is the how Sorok decomposite the Gini composition using of 5 group of the population, tell us that where zakat operates, zakat is levied on only D4 and D5, the high Gini contributors, and then will be transformed into the D1 and D2, where this is the group of the low income share group. And then in finally, the net effect of the Gini is exactly will be around 0.38. And then this is the philosophical foundation of Islamic redistribution. This is the Islamic philosophy where Islam made it redistribution. The tool appears as a technical fiscal mechanism. And then I think we all already know that there are some instrument on wealth redistribution in Islam, starting from zakat, wakaf, infak, sodakoh, and qardun hasan. This is all of the instrument that will be studied on this paper. And then this is the how the Islamic redistribution operator will be simulated under this paper. This slide is the methodological contribution, the formal mechanism that transfer Islamic measurable on the Gini coefficient. how this master equation will be simulated, and then this will be have the conclusion and later on. I think the next one, this is the specification of the model, starting from the approach and the formula, and then the model assumption. And this is the result. How is the simulation result if we are using the number of observation, yeah, we can see that there will be a pre-redistribution and versus post-redistribution. And then we also have a sensitivity analysis of the effective zakat rate implement by starting 2.5% the threshold, and then 5%, 10%, 15%, and 20%. So consistently monotic decline, the full compliant at 2.5% of zakat rate, it is around 3.2% of the GDP is more impactful than raising the rate, yeah, the initial distribution fix with population of 10 people, yeah. And then this is the macro scenario impact on the Indonesian Gini ratio. If we implement the scaling from the simulation that the national level using the transmission model by this four scenario, you can see that under the baseline by 2023, the Gini ratio still stand at 0.38, but by the transformative scenario, it can be reduced by 0.321. And then this is the potential versus realization gap and the projection. I think this slide tell us that under the national zakat potential, 327 trillion, the current realization is still only 26 trillion. This is below 8% of the potential, yeah. If the gap is narrowing to 50% by 2023, I think the Gini ratio can be reduced by 0.358. Yeah, this will be on par with Thailand and Vietnam.
Mr.
And
Thomas, sorry, may I interrupt? Can you conclude your presentation in maximum 1 minute,
thank you.
please?
Yeah, thank you, Pak Irfan. Yeah, I think this is the last slide. Yeah, so the policy implication on this paper, I think the first one, we need to have the zakat tax integration, and then we also need to build the digitalization of the ecosystem on zakat wakaf per app. And then the third one, I think there will be a need to dynamic NISOP while the fourth one, the large scale productive wakaf, need to be introduced as well. And after the post-zakat Gini monitoring, I think an annual Gini index by Basnas and BPS as an indicator of redistribution program impact should be also considered. And the last one, the education and the power and empowerment. I think the transition of Mustahik to Muzaki through the productive zakat and business capital as well need to be considered. And the last one, I think, as the conclusion of the key finding and the significant and limitation, I think Zakat, Wakaf, Infak, and Sodakah are not merely an act of worship, but they are measurable redistribution instruments that can significantly reduce inequality. I think that's all from me, Pak Irfan, brother and sister. Happy to have the question and as well as your review and input on this paper. Thank you, Pak. Back to you, Pak Irfan.
Yeah, thank you very much for Mr. Anas for your informative presentation. It was the last presentation we have, Alhamdulillah. To all presenters, thank you very much for your well-structured and excellent presentation. We truly appreciate your insightful research findings. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move to the reviewer feedback session. Inshallah, it is my great honor to invite our distinguished reviewer, Associate Professor Dr. Ismail Nizam, to provide academic comments, constructive feedback, recommendation, and question regarding the papers presented today. This part of session, approximately 20 minutes, including a presenter response. Professor, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you all the presenters for your presentation. So just for my information, these are the final research project, right, for in your master's program. This is the final research project in your master's?
Not really. I think this is one of the final assignment of one.
This is not the research project, but this is just an assignment. Under which course? Which course?
Islamic Political and Development.
Okay, Islamic Political Development. Political Development Economics, right?
Yeah.
And then this is a assignment under that. Same for all others as well?
Yes, the same, Pak.
I see. So this is not the, right. This is not the master's research project. Okay, good. Right. So with that, can I give some general comments on all the presenters, because I find there are some general areas that I can comment. Overall, I feel the topics are quite like these are quite imagine good topics, good areas to actually explore. These are good areas of studies. But of course, the studies, I understand now when you tell me this is an assignment, not the final project, because the research, the rigor, if in a master final project will be much deeper than this one, and it has to be more solid. But for an assignment, I feel the areas are quite good. And then the other thing I notice is this one, in terms of the research problem, in most of all the four, I find it little bit actually difficult to really understand and see exactly what is the specific research problem that you are actually investigation. What is the main research problem? So maybe if you can, I don't know, maybe one or two can just tell me like, what is the research problem that you are investigating? Let's say if I go to the first presenter, Vidya, right? Is it Vidya first?
Yeah, Pak.
Yeah, Vidya. Yeah. So let's say, what is the specific research problem that you are focusing on?
Yeah. In my paper, I see that we have standard, we have SDG goals, we have policy. But what I found in a journal article, there are most likely there are the same problems that it is still any gap between what to do and in the reality. So I think we need need a value. This is with I come if his that can be a function as an integrative framework to to make a line between what it's wrote in policy instead and SDGs standard and etc. to a real sector implementation. I think that's a problem.
Okay. Right. Then the other area, actually, I think this is something that all the students can improve. Maybe because I did not get the full the pro paper, I only got the slide, and then also maybe in the presentation, presenters did not spend time on the problem specifically, I didn't capture it. Maybe it is there. So the other area that I find a little bit of improvement is on the research method. Like, for example, most of you, like the first three presenters, you are present in a qualitative document analysis, but I think I didn't see how many documents are analyzed, how many documents, and what are the categories of documents, and what tools are used to actually analyze these documents. And there is no evidence of that analysis. There are no, any evidence of analysis being presented. So what are the themes and how did you analyze? Did you analyze using any tool? If you use a tool or software, there should be some output to show, right? Okay, this is the output. So those kind of how many documents and what is the document period? What is the inclusion criteria of the documents? What are the exclusion criteria of the document? And so this kind of more like a methodological detail. And then that when you say that you analyze the themes, for example, sample of codes, the code, then maybe some sort of some visual of your codes, the themes in a mind map format. So how did the themes emerge and how the themes evolve in your various document analysis? So some evidence of research, evidence of analysis. I was expecting to see a bit more evidence of research, but not only in the first presenter, but in terms of the methodology, that the sample size, the sample in your cases, it will be document. And then also specifically on the three presenters, the first three, I thought it is more like a systematic literature review is the method that you are using. So if that's the case, so there should be that research, the SLR process should be explained in very clearly, what exactly the process. So this, for me, it's more on the method, and method part is not very detailed, it's not very clearly shown. And then the evidence of research, evidence of analysis, there should be some output to show, and then of course the findings should be presented, key findings should be presented, like findings. And then sometimes I notice also the conclusion, the recommendation is kind of very disconnected from the key finding. Your recommendation has to be informed by the findings. For example, even in the last presenter, just now, the last final presenter, I noticed that some of the recommendations are not linked to the findings. So it's just sometimes it's out of nothing. Every recommendation should have a link in finding. And then your final conclusion should actually answer the research question. And in many cases, the research question also, I noticed this is something you can improve. Clearly state in the research question, what are the specific research question objectives? Then in the conclusion, you can actually address those questions and objectives. That's what the conclusion is supposed to do, evaluating how well or what have you established of those objectives. So I think these are some, but for assignment, I think for some more course assignment, this is quite good. Overall is good. Just if you want to expand this into your master research project, I think the research problem needs to be more strengthened. There should be some justification, because research problem needs to be justified in three major things. One is what exactly is the issue? Why is that an issue now? Right? And then what is the justification of the existence of this issue? Maybe that means you need to provide some sort of a data to show how significant is the issue, the problem, right? And that has to be strengthened, and then the methodology needs to be clearly explained, all the systematic procedural details of what exactly you did, step 1, step 2, step 3, and how did you select the documents, what are the inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, how many documents in total are analyzed. So those stuff kind of detail will actually make your research rigorous, therefore rely on your findings. So findings will be reliable. So in general, these are some things I can observe from the presentations that I just listened. But if I can get maybe the documents, the research, the project assignment in the document format, the full document, in my evaluation later, when I can give you some more detailed, specific comments on specifically on the content of the document. If maybe the school can share with me the 4 papers later, when I can submit more specific comments on each of the paper, because presentation looks very compact, summarized. There's a lot of details maybe missing there. So if we can get the document, I can provide more specific comments on further improving basically the work. And then if, let's say, any one of you want to extend this into publishable research, I can actually suggest how to improve further all the works that has been presented. So those are my comments actually at this moment, generally my observation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Ismail Nizam, for your comprehensive evaluation and valuable academic insight for the presenter. Now, maybe I would like to invite presenters if there is any additional answer or response from Professor recommendation or advice, please.
Thank you, Pak Irfan. Thank you, Pak Ismail Nizam, for your review. Noted. I think in terms of the policy recommendation, I think what we have from your insight and your review, I need to make alignment on the objective research with what is the key finding, and then the formulation of the policy. Yeah, will do. Thank you, Pak.
Another one, Mr. Amrizal or Mr. Bambang, can you give some response or answering regarding the comments from Professor, please? Ms. Vidya as well, please.
What Bapak Ismail has very clear. I noted, Pak Irfan. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any additional from Prof. Ismail Nizam, additional explanation or advice on it?
No, I think basically my main comments at this moment are those. But it would be good if, let's say, if the presenters are looking to see some very specific comments on the work they have done, if the school can maybe share with me the 4 documents, not the slides, the papers, then I can go through them and provide some specific comments on various sections, basically to enhance the paper. So, and then also maybe, are you all looking to maybe present this later in conference or submit this to journals? If that is the case, then also I can actually give comments on improving it to the standard of journals and the conference. Because I was just looking at the slide and the presentation, which I believe is not everything that they have done. Right.
Okay, understood, Professor. You have also have a limitation to explore and advise the specific advice and recommendation for each presenter here. Well, if there is no other response, we will conclude this session reviewing from Professor. And now the floor is open for Q&A, question and discussion from our participants. Please, in this session, we can do with English or Bahasa Indonesia also okay. Yeah, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the raise hand feature on the Zoom or type your question in the box. And then when recognized, kindly introduce yourself by mentioning your name, institution, and to whom your question is addressed. Please keep your question concise so that we may accommodate as many as participants as possible. Bapak Ibu, dipersilakan jika ada pertanyaan. Audience, silakan. Silakan, barangkali ada yang bertanya. Oke, baik. Mungkin sembari... Oh, oke. Oke. Thank you, from Mr. Reza. Oke, sembari menunggu yang lain, mungkin sedikit dari saya ada pertanyaan mungkin ke Miss Widya ya. What's your framework difference ya, comparing to the existing green finance standard such as like ECG, TKBI, and others? Maybe Ibu Widya can explain, share.
Yeah, okay, fine. Terima kasih. Thank you. I think the framework in this paper is not intended to replace or to change TKBI, SDGs, standard, environmental audit. Those instruments are technical and regulatory tools. Meanwhile, this framework in this paper is more conceptual. It provides a Makassar-based lens to review whether the technical instruments are aligned with the environmental protection or real sector impact. In other words, that TKBI SDGs is the answer for whether an activity meets a green standard. And the other hand, in this framework in this paper, helps to us if the activity is also reflects Makassar Sharia value and Hifz Al-Biyah. I think that's all, Pak Irfan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Widya, for your explanation. Due to the time constraint, distinguished reviewer, dear presenter, ladies and gentlemen, as we have come to the end of parallel session, I would like to express my friendly appreciation to our respected reviewer for the valuable feedback and scholarly guidance shared today. My heartfelt thanks go to all presenters, for the excellent presentation, and to all participants for your engagement in this discussion, And we hope today's session has provided meaningful academic insight and fruitful scholarly exchange for everyone. On behalf of organizing committee, thank you once again for your participation and contribution. We wish you all continued success in your research and academic endeavors. With that, this parallel session is officially concluded. Please return to the main plenary rooms according to the schedule provided by the organizing committee. Yeah, it has been a pleasure for me moderating this session. Thank you everyone for your valuable participation. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
Wow.
warahmatullahi
Assalamualaikum
wabarakatuh.
warahmatullahi
Thank you,
Terima
Brother
kasih,
Irfan.
Taufik. Thank you,
Terima kasih.
Profesor Nizam.
Thank you, Profesor Niza. We move to main room ya, Brother Irfan ya.
Yes, please, Bu. Thanks, Professor.